Warren Morris hits a deep drive down the right field line. That ball is gone! LSU wins the College World Series on a home run by Morris.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the 60 feet 6 inches LSU podcast. Thank y'all for joining me. In this episode, I will continue to preview the SEC West, taking a look at Auburn and Mississippi State. As always, you can find the 60 feet 6 inch LSU podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, other major audio platforms. If you're viewing this on the YouTube channel, please make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. On Twitter, the account is at 60FT6IN LSU Pod. Once again, that's at 60FT6IN LSU Pod. Make sure to follow, hit that notifications bell, and interact with me on Twitter. And once again, you don't want to miss out. More content to come, more teams in the SEC West. And then I hope to wrap it up with a couple of shows with some guests that know a lot about SEC baseball, LSU baseball, leading you all the way up until first pitch at Alex Box Stadium. If you missed the last episode of the pod, I previewed Alabama and Ole Miss. I predicted a sixth place finish for the Alabama Crimson Tide, going 14-16 this year, and a fifth place finish for the defending national champions Ole Miss Rebels with a 15-15 SEC record. Of course, that episode is linked on the Twitter account, and once again, I will do the same for this episode, linking it in podcast form and the YouTube channel link as well. So, all right, let's get right into it. First up, the Auburn Tigers. So, raise your hand if you remember that the Auburn Tigers went to the College World Series last year, because I forgot. I didn't remember not a lick until I started doing research. I said, oh, yeah, they were pretty good last year. I forgot they made it to the College World Series. A lot of SEC teams in the College World Series last year. So last year in 2022, Auburn finished 43-22. They finished 16-13 in the SEC, which is good for a fourth place finish. They hosted their own regional, which they won. Then they went to Corvallis for the Oregon State Super Regional, which they won. Then they went to the College World Series, where they went 1-2, losing to Ole Miss, beating Stanford, then losing to Arkansas. So a little bit of a SEC West flavor right there at the College World Series. In terms of their team statistics for 2022, hitting, 6th in batting average, 2nd in hits, 10th in home runs, 10th in slugging, but they did hit a lot of doubles. They came in 3rd in doubles. So not a ton of pop, but they could get on base, go gap to gap, and really move those runners around the base as well. When you look at pitching for Auburn last year, 7th in ERA at 4.49, struck out the 4th most opposing hitters, tied for 1st in saves with 20, gave up the 2nd most hits and the 2nd most doubles. So they could lock you down at the end of the games, but until they got to the end and that stud closer they had last year, it was a little bit hit and miss there, giving up that many hits and that many doubles. And some of that may be attributed to their ballpark. They have a weird, funky ballpark where they have like this big wall, Fenway-esque and left. Then they have some nooks and crannies out there and some odd configurations. So if you find a gap or that ball takes a weird hit off the wall out there and, you're not necessarily used to playing it, it takes an odd bounce, you're going to have a lot of doubles. When you look at the Tigers' 2023 schedule, they open with a home series versus Indiana. Then they go to Los Angeles for a 3-game series with USC. So once again, just like Alabama, taking a trip out to Pepperdine, another SEC West team making a trip out west to go play USC. So that's really cool for those kids. Have to tune into that to see how that turns out. They also play Southeastern for a 3-game set as well. When I looked at their SEC schedule, really nothing stood out to me. Not that it was ho-hum because the SEC is loaded, particularly the West, but no 4-game stretches or 6-game stretches like Ole Miss has. Just a tough SEC schedule as you would predict, but nothing treacherous out there in terms of back-to-back-to-back really rough weekends for Auburn. When you look at the transfer portal, I really found nothing to note for them, which was kind of odd, the way that teams are hitting the portal nowadays. They did bring in a really good freshman recruiting class. It was ranked number 6 by Baseball America. They got 4 of the top 100s onto campus this year, and that was actually second to LSU in terms of number of top 100 recruits that made it to campus. And the highlight of that class is the number 39 player overall, catcher Ike Irish. Moving on to what we can expect from the Auburn Tigers baseball team this year, both on the hitting and the pitching side. So let's take a look at the hitters first. In terms of their key losses from the 2022 team, it starts and ends with, doesn't end, but it starts with Sonny DeShara, one of the best hitters in the country, the big first baseman, transfers from Samford, and he really just tore the conference up last year. It was fun to watch him hit because he could absolutely find the sweet spot, put barrel to ball, home runs, doubles, whatever it took. He was just a tough out for anybody that faced him. So DeShara last year hit 383, 22 home runs, and 59 RBIs. Just a massive year for him. And I didn't like watching him play against LSU, but it's really fun to watch his approach to plate and watch him hit. They also lost another top of the order guy in Blake Rambush. He hit 327, 16 for 21 in stolen bases, so he was one of those table setters for DeShara. They also lost Brooks Carlson, hit 297, and another good hitter for those guys last year, Brody Moore, hit 291. So really 4 guys that hit over 300 or close to 300. That's going to be tough for Auburn to place this year. Auburn lost 54% of their home run production, and they lost 45% of their RBI production heading into 2023. But the good thing is they do return 5 starters from the College World Series team, meaning 5 guys that played significant innings in the College World Series on the hitter side of things. That would be outfielder Kason Howell. He hit 287. He had 19 doubles last year, which was second on the team. And he also had 11 stolen bases. So Howell will be a very big piece in the outfield this year for those guys. Also, another starter in the outfield, Bobby Pierce. He hit 10 home runs. And then moving on to the infield, they bring back Cole Foster, who hit 9 home runs on second on the team with 47 RBIs. They bring back catcher Nate LaRue, and then a part-time starter in the infield and outfield with Bolello and Hill, respectively. So when you look at it, they got 2 outfield starters back. You got your catcher back, which is a big deal. They brought in that big-time freshman who's a catcher as well. And then on the infield, you have a starter and another part-time starter back. So looking to fill some holes on the infield. While they bring back a lot of experience and guys that played in the College World Series, so they know what to expect from the pressure of the SEC, the regionals, and super regionals, I don't know if that lineup has the top-end talent and really the middle-of-the-order talent that scared a lot of teams last year with regards to DeShara. Rambush was a pest at the top of the order, and then you had Carlson and Moore. Now, Howell and Pierce are big-time hitters, and they're going to slot right into the middle of that order with some pop as well. But LaRue hit like 8 or 9 last year, a lower 200s hitter. And then your part-time starters that you bring back in Bello and Hill, I'm sure those guys have matured and are ready to take the next step up. You just don't know what they're going to do in a full schedule and what those numbers in production will look like. Moving on to the pitching side, I think this is where Auburn's going to have some issues. They only returned one of their weekend arms. So they lose Mason Barnett and Trace Bright. They started 14 and 17 games last year, respectively. They also lost their stud at the back end of the games, and that is closer Blake Burkhalter. He had 16 saves last year, 30 appearances. He threw 46 and a third innings pitched with 71 Ks, and he could throw multiple times on the weekend. And that guy had wipeout stuff. We talk about that 1-to-1 strikeout to innings pitched ratio, and Burkhalter was well above it, almost 2-to-1 with 16 saves. So he was able to lock it down when they got in the 8th and 9th inning for Auburn last year, and they lose him right out the door. You also lose another key bullpen piece in skipper Carson, who had 27 appearances, and he went 6-3 on the year. So another big bullpen arm. So who do they return in terms of a weekend starter? Like I mentioned, the only guy they bring back is Joseph Gonzalez. Now, he's not your typical kind of quote-unquote Friday night SEC arm to where he's going to run it up there mid to upper 90s, like a Sproat, a Waldrop, a Skeens. The Vandy's got the 2 lefties, Hunter Elliott at Ole Miss. Arkansas's got some studs, and so does A&M, guys that are really going to run it up there velocity-wise. Gonzalez is a sinker-slider guy with a power sinker. He will throw that a ton, gets a lot of jam jobs, a ton of ground balls, and he's going to pitch to contact. He wants to get out of there in 3 pitches or less and get up and down. If he can get 2 ground balls and a fly ball in 7 pitches, he'll take that all day. Last year, Gonzalez, he led the team in ERA at 3.22, which is very impressive. He went 7-4, started 14 games, and he went 78 innings pitched. So not a strikeout guy, like I said, but more of a contacted guy. And that shows right here when you look at his batting average against opposing hitters hit 276 off of him. So that's really high. And he only had 54 strikeouts and 78 innings pitched. Once again, effective. He's 90 to 93, I think, but just a power sinker. And I would imagine he's just going to move right into that Friday night role. They also bring back a key reliever, Chase Alsop, who had 23 appearances. He did have 2 saves, 3.38 ERA, so you wonder if he slots into Burkhalter's spot as a closer. Couple other bullpen arms and possibly part-time starters that may move into the weekend rotation. Tommy Sheehan started 3 games for the Tigers last year with 16 appearances. And then you had Jordan Armstrong, who started 6 games last year for Auburn with a 3-1 record. So Sheehan and Armstrong may be looking to move into that weekend rotation. But that's really all I could find in terms of the returners. Those are the only guys that really stood out. Once again, nothing that I could find unless I missed something on the portal side in terms of a couple pitchers that Auburn really brought in. So looking ahead to the 60 feet 6 inches 2023 prediction for Auburn, I know they made the College World Series last year, and they seem to kind of be hit or miss or a little bit of an up. Obviously, last year was a huge uptick, but I just don't know a ton of what they bring back besides the high school recruiting class, and that's a lot to ask for freshmen to step into the SEC and contribute in a big way. I like the middle of their order. I think they're going to have some guys with some pop and some good experience, but I definitely see some holes. What's the top of the order going to look like? And then you just can't have a cliff after you get to 5. You can't have 6, 7, 8, 9 just be designated outs and those guys hit 200. That's just not going to cut it in the SEC. And then when you look at their rotation, I like Gonzalez. He's going to probably give you 6 or 7 and keep you in a ton of games, and you better be ready to field some ground balls and play great defense behind him. But he's not really going to dominate teams in terms of strikeouts. Now, he'll dominate them by throwing up zeros. And he did that with a 3.22 ERA. But he's not going to do that with just a ton of strikeouts. That's just not him, and he's not effective like that. And then once again, I don't know what you have in the bullpen coming back. It's tough to replace a Blake Burkhalter with 16 saves and 30 appearances. I mean, when you figure if you're on the road in the SEC, Auburn comes to LSU, and they get the lead in the 8th and 9th. That's Burkhalter time, and that is lockdown central. And I know he did that last year against LSU. So with all that being said, I predict the Auburn Tigers to go 12-18. I think it's going to be a rough year on the Plains. Obviously, I'm not at the practices. I don't have the inside scoop. Just going off some different things, stats and who they had last year and whatnot. I think it's going to be a serious downslide for Auburn this year, and I predict them to finish last in the SEC West. Now, moving on to the next team we're going to preview this episode, the Mississippi State Bulldogs. I predict them to do actually the opposite. Look, State had a horrible year last year, coming off winning the 2021 College World Series. They went 26-30. They finished 9-21 in the SEC, which was last for the SEC West. And they were really hurt by injuries early on, specifically from their pitching staff. They were kind of decimated by injuries, and you're going to see that when I go over some of their 2022 stats. It's just not the Mississippi State that you think of, and you don't think of them like that as a program, And I think this year is going to be a different story in Starkville. When you look at their team statistics from 2022, 10th in batting average at 277, 6th in slugging. And then you look at the other categories, hits, doubles, runs scored. They're in that 10 to 12 range, which isn't great. They did hit 95 home runs, which is good for 6th in the conference. But it gets even worse when you look at their pitching staff last year. They had the worst team ERA in the conference at 6.07. And that's not just conference games. That's all games. That's terrible. The opponent batting average was 260, which was the 12th worst. They were last in saves. They only had 3 saves last year. And then they gave up the 12th most runs and earned runs, gave up the most home runs, the second most doubles. I mean, it's easy. You know where I'm going. I pretty much just laid it all out there. They walked a ton of guys. Just a nightmare on the mound. When you look at statistics at the pitching staff, that is the anti-pitching staff statistics right there. Those guys were just not good last year. And like I said, injuries played an enormous role in that, losing their ace very early in the year. In terms of their fielding, that was a bright spot for those guys. They actually led the conference in fielding percentage at .983, committed the least amount of errors, and they were very good on the catching side as well. Looking at these guys' 2023 schedule in Starkville, very cool home weekend series with Arizona State. I love that. I think Arizona State, if they get a home and home, even better. Tempe's a very cool place to play. They were also in the Frisco College Baseball Classic. LSU, I would love for you to get in that next year. Frisco's an amazing ballpark and a great place to play out right outside of Dallas and North Dallas. But back to state. They play Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Cal in the Frisco College Baseball Classic. And for those who don't remember, Oklahoma lost to Ole Miss in the National Championship Series last year. The SEC schedule, they have a tough 4-game stretch at the end of the year. And this may determine whether or not they get into the SEC tournament, whether they're in that regional discussion. But, I mean, this is just a murderer's row at the end of the year. At Tennessee, Arkansas at the Dude, at LSU, A&M at the Dude. So 4 top 10 teams preseason right there to end your season. That is just a really rough stretch right there. That's terrible. But and I'm sure that place will be rocking for when Arkansas and then A&M come to town. In the transfer portal, they really went out and got it in the transfer portal. They had the 4th ranked transfer portal class this year with 6 players in the top 100. And they had the 2nd ranked freshman recruiting class. And they also had a ton of players in the top 100 as well. They had 4 or 5. So great job by that staff. Really, knowing they lost a lot of people, knowing last year wasn't good in Starkville, they went out, hit the portal hard, and they hit that recruiting class hard. But I'm sure they had built up a lot of that in the previous year, being able to show those guys, look what we're doing, and they won the national championship. So as y'all know, that's usually done 1 to 2 years in advance. When you look at their portal class, they have the 5th ranked player in the portal, Samford outfielder Colton Ledbetter. Last year for Samford, he had .318 with 16 home runs, 57 RBIs, and he had 16 doubles. So this guy, a lot of people are talking very highly of him, and I'm ready to see him play. I'm excited. I mean, this guy is instant plug-and-play outfielder for Mississippi State. You're going to plug him probably into the top 4 of that lineup, and he's going to start out there from day one. I mean, just think of what Sonny DeShara did at Samford. He transitioned to the SEC last year with Auburn, and then you got another Samford coming into the SEC West and Colton Ledbetter. So very excited to see this young man play for State this year. They also have an impact pitcher from Memphis. He was the number 31 ranked portal transfer. That is Landon Gartman. He threw 86 innings pitched last year for the Tigers, 94 Ks, 7-1, a 175 batting average against. And he was actually the American Conference Rookie of the Year. So I would imagine Gartman is somebody they went out and got. He's a starter. They're going to hopefully throw him into the weekend rotation as well. They also picked up a key infielder from them, from UNO. So out of Blake Dean's program, he was the Southland Newcomer of the Year last year. Infielder Amani Larry. He ranked 33rd in the transfer portal rankings. Last year for UNO, he hit .370 with an on-base percentage of .477. That's pretty impressive. You're getting on base almost half your ABs. They picked up a pitcher from Ball State, a pitcher from Texas, and then a left-handed pitcher from VCU and Tyler Davis. They also picked up on their roster, it says infielder/outfielder from VCU. His name is Connor Husak. He hit 12 bombs last year for VCU with 30 doubles. So when you look at the portal, you think Ledbetter is going to slide right into the outfield. Husak is either going to play infield or outfield, swing guy, maybe even DH a little bit. And then you got Gartman, who I'd imagine is going to go in the weekend. And then you got Larry, that infielder from UNO. So right there, you're looking at 3 starters and then a potential weekend starter. So they did a great job in the portal. Okay, moving on. So what did State lose off of last year's team? And then what do they have coming back? 2023 hitters. First of all, their key losses. They lost 60% of their home run production and 58% of their RBI production. So a lot of runs to make up for. They lost 3 of their top hitters from last year. RJ Yeager, man, look at this stat line. RJ Yeager hit .317, 18 home runs, and 56 RBIs. That's massive. They also lost Cameron James, who hit .303 with 9 bombs. Brad Cumbest hit .302 with 15 bombs. And then Tanner Logan, who had 17 home runs as well. So right off the bat with Yeager, James, Cumbest, and Logan, those are 4 key guys that they have to replace. That's a lot of production right there. It's a lot of pop with those names. But looking to replace those guys will be returners, outfielder Kellum Clark. I know a lot of people at Mississippi State are happy about him. He's going to be one to watch in the SEC right this year to have a breakout year. Clark last year hit 257 with 14 home runs. So if they can surround him with some other guys with some pops, so teams can't pitch around him, I would imagine his home run numbers are going to go up. Potentially a 21 home run guy this year, maybe. Also, DH Hunter Hines, who hit 300 last year with 16 bombs and 52 RBIs. So I'd imagine Clark and Hines are going to be right there in that 3-4 range for the Bulldogs. On top of that, Colton Ledbetter, as you know, the transfer, he's going to be right there in the mix. They also bring back infielder Luke Hancock, who hit 279 last year at first. They bring back Lane Forsythe, and they're probably going to add the Armani Larry kid right to the infield mix as well. One other guy I forgot to mention, he was a freshman last year. He played a little bit for State, but he came in with a ton of hype, and I think he's going to he has a chance to make a big impact this year for the Bulldogs, and that is sophomore Slate Alford. He played in 26 games last year. So the word in some of those articles I read and the word around State is that people are really excited for what he's going to do this year if he can get a full-time starting gig. And they really have, a lot of potential with that lineup. Clark and Hines are going to produce, and it's just up to the transfers to kind of fill in around them. And you're going to have Hancock, who's been there, and Forsythe. So State looking to have a really solid 6 or 7 hitters in that lineup, just reading off stats and reading off who's coming in. Now, when you look at the pitching staff, that's a huge question mark for me. They lost their main weekend guy in Preston Johnson. He threw 79 innings last year, 13 games started. They also lost Brandon Smith, who started 8 games and 64 innings pitched. Out the bullpen, they lose Jackson Fristow with 24 appearances. Drew Talley had 19 appearances. And then they lost Landon Sims, who was their ace. They lost him early in the year to Tommy John. Just a big blow for that kid because he was going to have a great year coming off of that amazing 2021 he had in the College World Series. But they do return one of their weekend guys in Cade Smith. He had a very good year last year. He went 4-4 with a 3.86 ERA, started 4 games, 72 innings pitched though, so a ton of work for Smith. And this is really impressive. Listen to this. 221 batting average against. So Smith is going to be massive for those guys. I'm sure you can just pencil him in to Friday night guy. Then they add on the back of him Landon Gartman, that transfer we mentioned from Memphis. I would imagine he's battling for a weekend role if he already hasn't been slated there. They do bring back some bullpen experience with Casey Hunt, 15 appearances. Pico Cone, it's a great name, 21 appearances. And then from the starter side, Parker Stinnett had 6 games started last year. So I mentioned besides Gartman from Memphis, they brought in a VCU pitcher, a Texas pitcher, a Ball State pitcher. So we're going to have to wait to see how those guys shake out. You got Cade Smith coming back as your weekend starter. So some of those transfers are going to have to step up on the mound. And I just don't know enough about them to really know what to expect to say, yep, this guy's your weekend guy, this guy's your setup guy, and this guy's going to be your closer. What do we predict here on the 60 feet 6 inches podcast for the Mississippi State Bulldogs in 2023? Look, I think they're going to have a better year. There's no way their state's going 9-21 again. Too proud of a program, too much history, too good of a coaching staff. Arguably the best facility in college baseball. With everything they've done over there, it's absolutely amazing. And one of the best fan bases in college baseball. And they have been since, the 90s and the 80s with Ron Polk. He got that sucker going, and they're great baseball fans over there in Starkville. I just think in this day and age, they did a great job going out and getting transfers. Obviously, they're building for the future as well, having a bang-up recruiting class come in. I just can't wait to see some of these guys play in some of the hype, right? Ledbetter and Gartman pitch. Armani Larry's getting talked about a lot on the infield. The UNO transferred. But to me, the ultimate question is, what's the pitching staff going to look like? I went over those stats early in the pod, and the pitching staff was terrible. They were last in the conference in just about everything. I'm not going to revisit that, but it's just bad. So what does that look like moving forward? They're going to be able to swing it. I read somewhere the other day, somebody predicted they potentially have 5 guys with double-digit home runs, especially with Clark and Hines, throw Ledbetter in there, and Husak from VCU. He had 12 home runs last year. That's 4 guys right there. And you got Hancock at 7 and the fourth side hit some for them last year. So I definitely think it's going to be better. Are they going to be able to jump into that top 3 of the SEC West? I don't know. It's going to be tough. I just don't have a good enough picture and a good enough idea to what those guys' arms are going to look like. They should know where they stand, though, after their non-conference schedule. You start off with Arizona State, historically good program, maybe going back a step in the Pac-12, and then you go to the Frisco College Baseball Classic. And then they kind of ease into SEC play, but they got that murderer's row on the back end with Tennessee, Arkansas, LSU, and A&M. So if they can hang tight and make some headway early in the year in those first 6 series before they get to the last 4, I think State's got a great chance this year. Therefore, I predict the Mississippi State Bulldogs to go 15-15 in the SEC conference play and to finish 4th in the SEC West. All right, so that'll do it for us here on the 60 Feet 6 Inches LSU podcast. Thank y'all for joining me. As a reminder, like, subscribe, comment on the YouTube channel. Make sure to follow me on Twitter. The account is at 60FT6IN LSU Pod. Make sure to set that notifications bell and interact with me on Twitter as well. Y'all know where to find the podcast. It's going to be on Apple, Google, Spotify, other major audio platforms. On deck, Arkansas Razorbacks and the Texas A&M Aggies. So until next time, stay safe, and as always, go Tigers.